There's like a TikTok about this where if you stand up for queer people, people are like, "Are you gay? Are you doing?" It's like
I didn't go on social media and start talking about things from the lens of a Black woman on television. Welcome to Come Back with Erica Cobb, a community of folks like yourselves who are getting ready and staying ready for their next chapter. Well, my guest today is a storyteller, filmmaker, and creative director who creates world-building narratives using warm visuals and vulnerable performances through her lens of being a Black queer femme. She recently released her first short film, Abundance, about the limitations and radical possibilities of identity. Her written and visual work imagines a world where Black womanhood is an abundant, overwhelming experience of safety, pleasure, and joy. She is devoted to using radical Black imagination to create stories, art, culture, and community. Amber Phillips, aka Amber Abundance. Welcome to Come Back with Erica Cobb.
Beautiful. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. In the interest of transparency, I was first introduced to you through a program we're both in called Meta We the Culture, which is a celebration and amplification of Black creators. And while there's been over 100 creators in this program over the years, there is just something about you, and I'm sure all of my listeners are going to hear it because you just really stand out in a way that I kept finding. We do these, we'll do these meetings via Zoom, and I just kept looking over to you. You just are so dynamic.
I'm a trip too, so don't put me on Zoom.
I love it. So I want to start with your short film, Abundance. It was a part of the 2021 Black Star Film Festival selection and won the Audience Award for Best Short Narrative. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a surprise, but a really just awesome experience with our audience there because it's all Black people.
Right. And does it mean, for me, it almost like, when it's your peers, it means more to be recognized because they understand the inner and outer workings of what it takes for you to have produced what you produce. So talk to me about that aspect.
Well, Black people are the only people who matter to me, to be honest. It's Black people and people of color. Everything else, I feel like whiteness has dominated so much of our culture, so much of our understanding of ourselves, because we're all typically, when we talk about racism, we talk about it through the lens of whiteness too, and not about the fact that we're all taught the same white supremacist, capitalistic patriarchy. So when we think about undoing those narratives, hardly any of that work focuses on the people who are most impacted, who have been taught that these are the things you need to do. These are the things you need to believe in order to be successful in this world. So once I realized that, because before I dived head, like completely gave myself over to my artist practice and my writing and my creativity and being a creator, I worked in politics in Washington, D.C. And I just felt every conversation we had really centered what white people wanted, what they thought, how we would get them on board, and and we would just assume Black people would be there because Black people vote liberal and Black people are Democrats. But it's like, no, you can't half-ass. Can I cuss on here? Sorry. You cannot half engage us. You have to create things that are created for us must be intentional, from our art, from our political campaigns, so on and so forth. So when I made Abundance, I was very clear that I was taking that directly to Black audiences, directly to queer audiences. And, if white folks wanted to throw in some coin and throw in some help, gladly, because that's what y'all supposed to be doing.
Right.
But that, it meant the world to me too. And I was just explaining this to a friend. When I go out to Black events, I oftentimes get recognized for my work and my online presence. And he was like, how do you deal with that? I was like, it is everything to me, truly, because that's who it's for.
Yeah.
That's who I want to be talking to. That's who I want to be engaging with. And I think since I moved out to LA, people are surprised that I really mean that. I mean that from not only my audience, but the people that I work with. Like everybody who touches my creative work when it comes to storytelling must be Black. Like they have to be Black, or they have to really love Black people, because I do. And it needs to match that energy.
You know, it's so, and I'm not going to say strange to me because it's not strange, but it's interesting that the way that you described, you know, you're centered and very much focused on your demographic, your people, our people, Black people. And then if white people want to sprinkle in some coin, and that has been the absolute formula for everything that we have experienced as people of color in this world, because everything has always been catered towards white people, and then Black people, much to what you said about politics, are expected to just follow along because it's the best it's the better of the worst, or the two like two or three worst, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it is very important to understand not only who you are, and these are keys for my comeback community, who you are, what you represent, but also where your demographic is as well, because I find a lot of people try to get everyone. And when you try to get everyone, you really are targeting no one.
You're targeting absolutely no one when you try to get everyone.
Right.
And what that also, it's just coded language for white people. When we say everyone, because when you really think about that, right, you're overcorrecting for the folks who hate us or the folks who don't understand us. So that's something I've pushed back against for a long time, that if you're afraid to be specific, you're afraid to speak to the folks. If you want to talk to everyone, coded language, quotation marks, then be honest about that. Don't try and say that this is for Black people when it's not. Don't try to say this is for queer people when it's not, because we can often tell. And I think what happens a lot in our society, especially when it comes to, we see this on in television and film all the time, it's just Black on the surface. And my work is meant to be Black to the core. That's it. That's the whole thing for me. So if that's not what you're invested in, if that's not what you want, then you're going to have to pick another girl.
Right.
I'm not that girl, you know?
Right. You know, I have been in the media space for 2 decades, and that has constantly been a struggle. It's been something that I have spoken about a lot in a lot of different realms, because people need to understand, just because you have a Black woman in this space, if there isn't a support behind me, then you're utilizing me as just a prop in order for, if it could be for equity and inclusion purposes. It could be that you really understand there's a need for diversity, but not diversity to support the person that you're putting in the forefront. So when we talk about, you know, back of the house, front of the house type things, it's like there has to be, where you said to the core, there has to be representation to the core. I love how you put that. I'm like, I just like, remember that. Yeah. So tell me, why abundance?
Oh my goodness. Because it just is. I think sometimes, especially in this, like, now that wellness has been super capitalized and you can go and you can goop it up, you can go on retreats. There's this idea, I think it has been totally co-opted in terms of like, you have to manifest abundance, you have to call in abundance, when the reality is abundance just is, right? Typically within capitalism, we operate on this idea of scarcity. It can only be one. There's not enough. But when you really think about our world and ourselves, resources are infinite. What's happening is things are being hoarded, and we're being told that that's what we need is somewhere over there, right? Or somewhere beyond our reach. So when I also have been doing politics and media, at the center of politics and media for a long time, I used to go by Amber J. Phillips, the High Priestess of Black Joy. I hosted a podcast called the Black Joy Mixtape.
Yes.
You know, we love a rap name around here.
Yes.
And I had gotten really burnt out. Like, I was exhausted. And I think when I look back on that time, it's because I felt like I had to do everything right then in my 20s, or else I wasn't going to be successful. I wasn't going to have everything that I needed. So that ultimately, what that meant was I got ran into the ground, right? So I decided, I hope you can't hear that too badly. Can you hear?
I don't hear any background.
Okay. So I decided to take a month-long sabbatical in Brussels with my best friend. Months before, I was like, I want to take a month off where I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do any work. And then a couple months later, she called me and she was like, well, how about Belgium? Because she was going to do work, but her work was, she had an office. Her job had like international offices. So we spent a month out there, and I just got to really be. I got to, I feel like I walked all of, Brussels is teeny tiny, if anybody has ever been there. And I just used to walk around, get me a little treat, and just go out and see the world. And we got to travel to different places in Europe. And it was right before I was meant to go to Paris for the first time. I talked to one of my really good friends about, I don't know how I'm going to transition back into work when I leave here. And I had just moved to LA because of a fellowship. And she said, you know, Amber, you can be whoever you want. If you want to start over, you can start over. And that's what it is. If you wanted to change your name, that's what it is. And I was standing outside of the Eiffel Tower. We went to the Louvre, and we were just like, I never dreamed that I would be able to take myself those places. And I came back and I was looking over old videos, and I had used the word abundance multiple times. And I was like, oh, I'm Amber Abundance now. Change his Instagram profile. Like, that really was it. And then I felt like in naming myself Amber Abundance, I really started to believe it and embody it. And that's what it came to be. And now there are people who don't know my last name is Phillips, like at this point. So when all that came together, in case to answer, when all that came together, I decided, when the pandemic hit, I had always had this dream of, even before the pandemic, I had this dream of doing like a live storytelling series where I just stand and give people these stories that I've held throughout my life. And then the pandemic hit, and I was joking. I was like, oh, I get to work on this now. And then I did. And I wrote 3 stories entitled Fat, Angry, and Queer. And that just felt like the foundation to my abundance, to where I'm coming in. So that abundance has just given me so much space and permission to be all of who I am, instead of sectioning myself out based on what environment I feel can hold me, right? And now I'm just in the space where I'm like, I'm bringing all of it. I'm bringing the humor. I'm bringing the loudness. I'm bringing the music of me. I'm bringing the style. Like, there's no reason why I have to turn these knobs down, to make myself more digestible, when I know that abundance is my birthright. Abundance is real. It's a natural resource. Everyone has access to it. So how do I want to live in that reality? So that's really why for me, and how I have been able to really grab onto that notion and not feel like I have to do anything special to have it. I don't have to meditate 3 times a day to have abundance. I don't have to do it. Just is. It's there for all of us.
Wow. Like, you gave me a lot to think about. I was like,
yes,
you know, because first of all, your friend's saying, Amber, you can be whoever you want to be. And sometimes it's like, we know these things, but
we've been told them since we were a child.
Right.
But somewhere along the way, it clicks off, and you have to click that back on.
Right. And sometimes it's that message, and I'll say, it's like, I always say, I'm like, that was the ancestors, because it's the right message in the right moment. And that for whatever reason, like I'll say something back to my mom, like, I was talking to so-and-so and they said this, and then all of a sudden it clicked, and she's like, Erica, I've told you that 50 times. 50 times I've told you that. And I'm like, well, I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't receiving it. Okay.
You got to get it when you get it.
Exactly. But then when you talked about, being burnt out, and between politics and like a creator, I also, and I'm not going to put words into your mouth, but I would imagine that there had to be this duality of those two positions that were causing maybe an expedited burnout.
Oh yeah. That was specifically, I worked in women's rights organizing. I worked at the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, right? And this was a place that was predominantly white and ran by white women. And then on the other side, I was doing Black media. So there's clips of me on Roland Martin. There's clips of me talking about Blackness. I was hosting these parties called Black Joy Turn-Ups at my house, because this was also around the time of the first rise of the protests against police brutality, right? This was around Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and all these things. And I just felt like I literally felt like kind of like a superhero character. Like I was putting on the blazer during the day, then I would take it off and I would go do these things, and I would do that, and I would do that. And it was really because, and this is why I started my podcast, it was with my dear friend, Jazz, the King of the South, because I was tired of separating these things, right? Like, this was around the time I was coming into my Saturn return, if anybody knows what that is, honey. And I was just...
Well, can you actually, I would like can you expound?
I'll try my
that?
best, because I have to pretend to be astrology queer, because that's our language. Okay. But I'm doing the best I can. I don't feel like you're allowed to be gay and not know your chart, so
wait, I'm so sorry. I just have to, I'm sorry, my sister, I hope she doesn't kill me for saying this, but she has this motto that basically she hates cats and she doesn't know what time she's born. So if that is a deal breaker, then it's just that.
Yeah.
And it just cracks me up.
So some people are walking around like, oh my God, you don't know what time you were born. We can't date. Like my mom was like, why are you so obsessed with this? I was like, I need it in order to access my community. Please tell me what time I was born so they can stop asking me. Thank you. She was like, you have your birth certificate. So I figured it out. But Saturn return, I believe your first Saturn return happens around between the time you're 26 and 29, which is like a full cycle of life where you're back in the place where, I know I'm explaining this wrong or not as well as somebody else could, but you're an adult, but you're in a childlike state, right? Most people who go through their Saturn return, they return to maybe something when you were a teenager that brought you a lot of joy that you don't do anymore. Or that was the biggest message for me, is whatever you had formed yourself into, that some of your deep interests, your childhood interests and those kind of things were going to come up again. So for me, when I was a young person, I sang in my church choir. I played 2 instruments. I was in plays. I did all these things, but I was radicalized by the media coverage of Hurricane Katrina. And it just really opened my eyes to, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, very Midwestern. Yeah. And I believe that if you work hard, you get good things in this life. And that incident in American history showed me, ooh, that's not quite true. There's this whole thing called racism at play. There are systems at play that are literally working against Black people. especially poor Black people, that
Mm-hmm.
even if you try your hardest to work your way out of, there is going to be an obstacle every step of the way that you won't be able to outwork. You cannot
Right.
outwork misogynoir. You cannot
Right.
outwork those things. You can be successful,
Mm-hmm.
but it does not eliminate those things. And I think that's the myth that a lot of Black people are being told with the whole buy back the block and all these other things, that somehow by you being successful, you eliminate racism in your life or you eliminate discrimination in your life. Not true, babes.
Right.
The only way to eliminate those things is to address them.
Right.
You can't rich your way out of those things. You can't move from a new income away from racism. And we know this because, Black women giving birth to children, right? They're saying regardless of how much money you make, from the Serenas to your local young parent, you're going to face the same obstacle when you go in to have that baby. And I think that's a big reason why I make my work, because I think there's so many myths in Black spaces, which I already said, about how we address these things. And right now, the overwhelming talking point is that you can become a millionaire and eliminate these problems. No.
Who said that?
I mean, every time we celebrate a new Black billionaire, we're saying that, right? We think that because these people are hitting billionaire statuses, that means there's progress for Black people in this country. No, that just means that they have learned how to navigate these systems to their benefit, but that doesn't have a trickle down effect. The only thing that will actually have a trickle down effect is if we pair money. I'm not saying money is, I think capitalism is the problem, but I think a lot of good can come from how we use money, but we have to connect those resources with a plan, with an ideology of how we're going to actually save each other's lives.
Right.
Because it's not, we see plenty of rich people go through hell, or just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you know anything, right? We see that on Twitter every week. We hear
it
something reckless.
Yeah, we see it on TV every week.
We see it on TV a lot. So I didn't forgot the question, child, but yeah, Saturn returning, me coming of age. I want people, as much as we set goals around, like we're in this program, and it's an honor to be able to wake up and do what you love every day. That's excellent.
Yeah.
But we have to pair that with something we value.
Right.
We have to pair it with that, or we're just going to keep accumulating things and awards and positionality, and it's going to mean nothing to no one but ourselves.
Wow. Yeah. There's such an irony in that statement, though, because it meaning nothing to no one but ourselves in terms of and I say this very loosely, the Black community, because I do understand there's different neighborhoods,
right.
In the community, but together, we build the community. That there's so much like some of the most celebrated figures are Black people. Like in terms of like the successes that we see in sports, the successes that we see even, Barack Obama hangs on a lot of mantles as much as Jesus.
Literally, it's him. It's Barack Obama and Jesus.
Right.
Michelle Obama might have recently got her own picture too, but they pretty much got the whole family up there.
Exactly. But when it comes to what matters, like when it's mattering to everyone, is that a cumulative in terms of the value of our society. And that's the irony. Like that's the irony. Wow. Oh my goodness. First of all, you're listening. I'm like, you are taking me like, I'm like going through tunnels and just like, I'm with you.
Oh my
I am
goodness.
with you. Like,
I love
oh my gosh.
that. I love
oh
that.
my gosh. Comeback community, you're listening to Comeback with Erica Cobb. We are speaking with storyteller, filmmaker, creative director, just overall creator, Amber Abundance. Let's talk about you as a creator, because you obviously, we talked about Meta and you're on Instagram and your TikTok is super popular. First of all, why did you gravitate towards creating in that realm, and how did you start in terms of social media? Because I see a lot of people who are like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then they get frustrated and nothing ever happens with it.
Yeah, I love that. So I started online. My first social media platform that I like had a bit of success with was Twitter. And it was because, when Twitter first started, I was in college and people were basically using it to track down celebrities in their city. Remember, they like, people would tweet like, brushing my teeth, eating cereal. And then Black people got on there and remixed it. And I started to really use it when I was working on a campaign, and someone tweeted, I was on Twitter and someone was like, POTUS is having an affair. And I was like, oh my God, not my president.
Yeah.
And they were talking about Scandal Child. And I was like,
oh my God.
Let me turn on TV and see what they talk about. I didn't know there was a Black girl on TV doing politics. Literally, that's actually how I got on Twitter and started cracking jokes on there. So that was my entry point, was live tweeting TV shows, specifically Scandal with other Black people. It was just such a time. If you weren't, you have to be there.
Yeah.
But the platform that I have gravitated towards is Instagram. And it's really because I was on Snapchat, and then Rihanna said, we're not using Snapchat anymore. And I had gotten my whole family on Snapchat, and it was because I realized its power to communicate my life to my family that was still in Columbus, Ohio. Without social media, unless I told them everything that happened in my day, they had no idea what I was doing during the day. And I just had, my twin sister had just had my niece Hannah. So I'm like, you have to get on this platform called Snapchat, and you have to send me videos, everything she does when she breathes, send me a video. And that's truly how I got started. And then I, of course, had an Instagram account. I took pictures of my food like everyone else.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they started doing the stories situation. And the people who followed me on Snapchat, they were like, yo, you have to do that on Instagram, because I was just the same way I am now. I was just on there talking big shit. I was on there showing people my day when we went out to the club. My mom was like, when do you even sleep? Like, you're always out. Just having a good time in Washington, D.C. So I was like, I don't know how to do this on Instagram. And this same friend, my friends are awesome. This same friend was like, well, if I'm the only one watching, then you make them for me. And I was just like, okay, that's good enough. And then, of course, that's what I did. And this is why you have to be clear about who your audience is. I think when people want to get on social media, one, because they're consumers, they're seeing things that inspire them and they're like, oh, I want to do that. But also the gag with social media, the same gag that exists on television, is you can't see what's behind the screen. You only have this small box of how people are creating. Like, I'm sure if we zoomed out from either one of our screens right now, we would see so much more. We would see, how's your mic set up? Who's doing sound? Who's doing this? What's built? And instead, I feel like you have to focus on what you love, and you have to focus on who you're talking to.
Right.
So that is why I always have to remember that, even as more people get success online, that I still at every turn have to focus on what I love, what's real to me, and who I'm talking to. And I just happen to be someone who can, I write comedy. That's what I love to do. So it works well for that. But am I the kind of comedian who's going to, I don't know, put on a wig and start telling jokes? No, I'm not going to do that. But I will give you what feels real for me.
Yeah.
So that's really how I started, was to be able to communicate to my family. And then people started picking up like, oh my goodness, this girl's wild. Like, she will say anything. And I think I was starting to say a lot of the stuff that I felt in a political environment that where you weren't hearing that, right? Like we weren't hearing nuanced conversations on CNN. We weren't hearing nuanced conversations on MSNBC. But then you can put it online. You can put it on a podcast. And now there's a whole genre of that on places like TikTok, where people are able to break down certain narratives or TV shows. Now they used to hate it, right? But now we're seeing the value of commentators being able to say what works well and what doesn't work well with the representations that we see.
Right.
And there are folks I talk to, because I live in LA, I want to be a writer. You know, there are some people like, you should stop. But if it's, there are certain things I will never let slide. And one of them is colorism. I'm always going to talk about colorism. I'm always going to talk about fat phobia. I'm always going to talk about anti-Blackness. Now, if you don't want me to talk about it, then maybe you should learn about those things too and not put them in your work.
Right.
So, because I see them as, again, because I'm always talking to Black people, these are very familial issues, right? These are the things that even when white people are not present, I am dealing with. I can be in a room full of Black, if you've ever read Their Eyes Were Watching God, that is a story without white people, but who's being oppressed? The Black woman in the narrative, you know? So that has always been my dream of infusing culture with that reality.
Right.
Even when I've been early to it, like there was no context for what I was saying. The first time I ever did that was speaking out against Nate Parker and his rape allegations and Birth of a Nation. There are people who still to this day think I betrayed Black communities by bringing up sexual assault, but we're Black.
Right.
Sexual assault is an issue in our communities. So if you don't want to talk about that, how are you actually for Black folks? All of us. So that has always been my, and people just, I've been described on Black publications as just being an angry Black feminist. And some people would just call me a Black feminist to try and separate me from Black people or separate me from Black women. But I am working in the interest of Black women and femmes and queer folks and non-binary and trans folks. That is how I've been able to expand my politic as well. Because when I started a lot of this work, I wasn't out yet. I didn't have context I had context, but I didn't know how to talk about it, because also being Black, like there's like a TikTok about this where if you stand up for queer people are like, are you gay? Are you doing, it's like, no, I'm first off, I'm Black, and we shouldn't treat Black people like this. Queer people, trans people, they are Black. You cannot just be for some Black people. That is how white people are, which is why they can put a Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. Hello? Are you trying to be that kind of Black person? Then you just say you white and leave, babes. Please. It's either all of us or not, and not all of us, because Clarence Thomas can't come to my party.
Yeah, obviously. But obviously. No, I was picking up what you were laying down.
Yes. And people do understand what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of if they want to do that work. If they want to believe that the liberation, whether or not queer people are able to survive, is a direct hit on if they can survive here too.
Right. It's wow. Okay. I have so many things. First of all, I often struggle with this myself. Like, which came first? I don't struggle with it, but I feel like it's something that's charged to me. Which came first, the sentiment or the platform? Because what I found was that, I didn't go on social media and start talking about things from the lens of a Black woman on television. I was put out there by someone who saw it, ripped it off ripped it off of YouTube, and then posted it, and then that's how a lot of the content that went viral for me went viral. So when people started coming to me like, I was supposed to be the leader of what I was saying. What the reality of the situation is I was just speaking openly the truth from my experience in front of company. Like, that's all that happened.
Right.
There wasn't any kind of like motive or, I didn't have like a meeting. There wasn't.
Right. You just got honest. Literally.
Right.
Anytime I've gone viral on TV, it's like, oh, I was just being honest today.
Right. Right.
Girl, this time was slipping today because
when it's the truth, it's something that you've said so many times that it feels quite comfortable, at least for me in this moment in my life, to just say it again. Just say it again. But then also when we're talking about like certain types of Black people, because the real fear is, especially when we're talking about the queer community, or, when we talk about trans community, a lot of Black people feel like we've made so many strides. Y'all want to be extra and cause other issues, and you're taking away from our strides by putting in other variables in the equation. They want to literally extract people as if they're variables and make them less Black or less willing of deserving of Black Lives Matter. And we never specified. We just said Black Lives Matter. Technically, Clarence would be in there if he wasn't acting such a fool.
That's a white man.
Right. You said what?
But I think it's also because they say that because they actually know how fragile their rights are. You actually know you don't have everything you actually need, babes. Like, specifically, and I think folks like us have to be clear about it too, because I still identify as a Black woman. We are able to occupy spaces with Black women, right? And if Black women are being honest, they would be able to sit down and took some time to understand how transphobia gender works. You are experiencing the same oppressions as Black trans women. When you don't, if you have a little chin hair, how are you treated? If your skin is dark, if you're tall, if you have broad shoulders, how are you treated? If you share an opinion that's different from a man, how are you treated? For real. Like, be honest about that. Our rates for intimate partner, cis heterosexual Black women, the rates for intimate partner violence are very high for you, babes. This is also the case for other groups. So to not take note of that is to be in denial about what liberation can actually look like for you. Right. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to deal with that because it's uncomfortable. It would force them to take notes of their immediate surroundings and their immediate environments. It would force them to note how maybe you have been bending and contorting in order to not only be successful, but to be safe in your communities. Right?
Right.
We're not as safe as it seems.
Right.
And we have to be honest about that. And the reason why that's true is because our siblings aren't safe either. Those ideas around violent patriarchy, the illusion of safety under, I think Black women, specifically cis Black women, they assume, think about our hair, like what all the things we're doing just to get access to things. We are performing gender even sometimes when we don't want to, because we know it will put us further in the margins. Right. And the only way to really address that is to be honest about it. I think a lot of people don't want to be honest because it's sad, right? It's oppression. Let this pass. Oppression at the hands of people who look like you is heartbreaking.
Right.
It feels terrible. It feels bad to know that some of us are raising sons that won't even date dark-skinned Black women, won't date someone that looks like their sibling, their sister, or their mother. It feels sad that there is such anti-Blackness that we don't want to address it for ourselves. We don't want to require more because we know that we have the same fear for the same fear that we place on other people, which is it will separate us away from our communities, right? When I came out, that was my biggest fear in telling my family, is that my family is very close knit. We all talk all the time. I'm like, I don't want to be separated from them. I don't want to be apart from them. I want them to love me just the same. And I'm not willing to not be myself in order to get that love. And a lot of us, it's not just queer folks, it's not just trans folks. You are abandoning yourself for thin love. It ain't even you. Since I come out and embody the way I'm loved in this iteration of Amber is so amazing. It's magnificent because it doesn't require me to be less than. And that's what I want for everyone. What if you took up all the space you deserve and still allow people to love you?
Whew.
This is why we create. This is the art, right? I think sometimes we think art is just about beautiful visuals and smiling Black people and great lighting. But this is what's under all that stuff, right? Especially when you have a value to your work. Because my goal is to not only tell it like it is, which I will do, but I'm trying to reimagine it how it could be. I want something bigger for all of us. And that starts with wanting something bigger for myself.
Right.
And that's always what I'm trying to make irresistible to Black folks.
Dang, I could talk to you all day. Like, seriously.
This is so great.
There's just something, I mean, obviously now all of you hear it as well. But when I say I have met so many amazing, wonderful Black creators, there's something about everything about you that just jumps out. Like, I can't explain it. I was trying, y'all, I had to track her down. Okay. I was like,
because I'd be nervous because I have done some interviews where I know people weren't prepared for what I was going to come and say.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm grateful that I allowed myself to show up so that I can see something different, because I'm experiencing something different with you, and I'm really appreciative of that. Thank you for creating that space for me as well,
girl.
Because everybody don't get this interview.
No, and I appreciate, like, I feel that. First of all, I've just been you've given me so much to think about, and I'm also going back to what you said about admitting to the idea that they know, when we were talking about Black people who feel threatened or feel like if you aren't conforming to this heteronormative society, then you're taking away from our progress. And the truth is, at least in my experience, I'm most able to speak openly and honestly about things that don't have me in anymore, about things that don't have me in the clutches of anger or despair or fear. And the more that I grow, the more that I tap into what is actually holding me, the more I'm able to speak openly, because the fear is always, much to what you were saying about the fear of coming out and this thin love, is what if I am not accepted, or what if someone challenges me on a personal level, and I know that's going to hurt. So most of the things, and I speak very openly about a lot of things, it's because it doesn't have me. And I think so many people are in the hold, especially when it comes to the oppression of Black Americans, because we know it's so real and tangible and present. So it is difficult, but at the same time,
and that progress is fragile.
Yes.
It's very fragile.
Yes. Amber, is there anything you want to share with my comeback community before because I will seriously sit here and try to talk your ear off. So
I like talking, so that's good.
Please come back. Come back to come back.
Okay.
Especially if there's something that you're feeling like, hey, this would be a really great topic to kind of dissect with Comeback. I would love for you to throw something my way because I know my audience is going to eat this up. So I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. I mean, one again, I just come in and allow spirit to do what it do. And I'm appreciative of that. And I think I value anytime I get to talk with Black folks across the universe, right? Across the spectrums and identities. Because I'm queer. I identify as a queer Black woman. And I love that, right? Like I'm thriving in that community. And I want people to know that the joy that I have, the joy that we have is possible for everyone if they're willing to take on that real deep charge of loving Black people. That's what I want to leave, is not just loving Black people when it's convenient or comfortable, but what would it really give? And not just in a political macro approach, but like even in your immediate community, especially in your immediate community, what could be possible if you expanded your love to how big we know love can be. So that's what I will leave with. Of course, folks can follow me at Amber Abundance on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. I really encourage Black folks to watch my short film Abundance, especially if you are a church-going Black person, because that was my story and that's some of the things that I tackled in that work. And I just want to leave people, even if they don't have all the language or know what to do next, I just want to spark the curiosity around what abundance could actually look like for us.
And where can we find your short film, Abundance? You
can find the short film at amberabundance.com. It's right on the front screen. You won't miss it. The trailer is running and everything. And or you can go directly to amberabundance.eventive.org and rent it there. But my website will take you straight to it.
Amazing. Comeback community. Amber Abundance. You can go to my online home, comeback.tv, to find the full podcast and more on Amber Abundance, including where to find her short film. I will have a link in the bio. So make sure that you check that out. And thank you so much, Amber. Thank you all for listening to Come Back with Erica Cobb. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too. Seriously, thank you for working with me and having me, because I'm all over the place. I just be all over the place. That's my truth right now. I will settle down soon, but thank you so much, Erica. This was great.
Thank you for your time, sis.
Okay.
You take care. Bye.